Alrighty, so welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking baseball books. We're going to do mostly nonfiction, but a little bit of fiction as well. We've got things that are, for the most part, pretty new, usually published within the past couple of years, but we've also got some very, some classics, right? Some old standbys too. So that's Brian and I will kind of run through these today, and we'll talk about where they're available. A lot of them we can get in print, but also a lot of them are available as ebooks or e-audiobooks as well. So yeah, we've got a little bit of everything, lots of biographies, lots of history, but all centering around baseball, of course. Alrighty, so I think we're going to get started here. And our first one up is Swing and a Hit, 9 Innings of What Baseball Taught Me. And that's Paul O'Neill. This one came out, I believe, within the past couple of years. And the title has hit in it, Swing and a Hit, and it's half of it is his philosophy on batting, and the other half is his philosophy or some really good Yankee stories. You hear a lot about his whole ethos is, well, I'm going to hit line drives, put the ball into play because you never know what's going to happen. He talks about being genuinely mad when he struck out, and he's saying, you know, the guys today, they're trying to really play long ball and hit everything over the fence. Me, no, I wanted to put it in play. There's so much more that you can get in the heads of the entire fielding team, not just the pitcher. When you hit line drives and you force the team to actually move. So I have some good Yankee stories in here from those mid to late 90s Yankees teams, but a lot of hitting philosophy too. Our next one is The Last Folk Hero, The Life and Myth of Bo Jackson. And I have to admit, this is half a football book as well, but there's a ton of baseball in here because as you probably know, Bo Jackson played both professional baseball and football at the same time. So kind of a feat there in itself. There had been other people who had done it. There were people who had certainly done it afterwards. But the whole crux of this book is he's the last person to do something like this and be such almost a tall tale kind of figure. The book opens up with this line from this Paul Bunyan poem. And that really gets to what this book is about, because he's living in the last era before everything is documented and everyone has a cell phone with a camera on it and can, take a picture or a video of kind of doing these incredible baseball and football feats too. And even some of the things that were captured on television, they were done they don't have as many cameras as they do today. And some of the stuff is just so unbelievable. The author went and did 720 interviews for this book. And almost every time, at least once, when he's talking to someone who either played with Bo Jackson or against Bo Jackson, it always comes up. The sentence starts, "You'll never believe this," or "It was so incredible," or "I only believe it because I saw it." And that's basically and tons and tons of stories about great fielding plays, great, monster home runs out of the park, or even just in batting practice. These monumental, almost superhuman feats. He didn't have the longest career, but while he was playing baseball and football at the same time, just really kind of this mythical athlete, if you will. So that one's long too, but it's also available as an audiobook, and I enjoyed the reader on that one as well.
And I do know that this book has been going around. At least I know one other person who read it. I think when my kids went on the winter break, the principal, Dr. St. John at Felix Festa, did a little thing where he said, "This is what I'm reading," and encouraging the kids to read. and he said this is the book he was reading. So a lot of people interested in Bo Jackson. Bo knows football, Bo knows baseball. I remember playing a video game with Bo Jackson.
And everybody remembers Super Tecmo
Bowl. The ball every time, and you couldn't stop him.
There's a whole chapter. You'll be happy to know there is a whole chapter on video game Bo Jackson and how he was unstoppable. And that's where I was introduced to Bo. Little ever so slightly before my time playing professional sports, but that's how I was introduced to Bo Jackson.
He was the human video game.
Yeah. So again, another area where Bo Jackson was a mythical, larger than life character. So a great biography there. Our next one is Jackie Robinson. I Never Had It Made, and that's an autobiography. And
you want me to talk about this one?
Yeah, if you want to do this one, yeah.
Because I know we have this one up in the library. I bought it for the library recently because I had read it, and I thought it was a great autobiography, not just of a baseball player, but of a man and who he was, and really great look at who Jackie Robinson was and not only what he overcame, but also a lot in there about his family and being a father, and he lost his son, and at the end it talks about politics and how he got involved with that at the end of his life. And some people criticized him for some things, and he kind of rebutted that, but it really lays out the whole thing. I just remember parts of the book where he's sitting in a hotel room with, I think it was Hank Aaron and a couple of these old timers. It was Negro League days, basically, type of a thing. And if you really want to know about Jackie Robinson, I think there's probably no better place to start than with his autobiography.
Yeah. And speaking of biographies, this one is a YA book, so a young adult book that came out, and it's called Call Him Jack, The Story of Jackie Robinson, Black Freedom Fighter. I would say, and again, a great overview, probably, I feel like even in school, we didn't learn about necessarily the activism and the political involvement that Jackie Robinson, was involved with after his playing career. And I think this is a great book for younger people, probably later middle school, early high school at the youngest, 8th, 9th grade. But the great part about it was there's a lot of primary source documents, and it throughout kind of just inserted right in within the text. And they really ask, young readers to look at, hey, here's a newspaper article, or here's a photograph. What does this say, about the person who was written about or the people who wrote it? So there's definitely some examining of primary source documents in there, which is kind of neat. And a lot of little sidebars to kind of help young people understand, well, okay, what is the NAACP? For instance, something like that. So I really thought that one was a good one for probably late middle school, early high school readers. Our next one is The Grandest Stage, A History of the World Series, and that's by Tyler Kepner. And he's the New York Times national baseball writer. This isn't a history that's chronological. It kind of skips around. It picks up different themes about the World Series. So there's, a whole chapter on managing the World Series, a whole chapter on what it's like to lose the World Series and live with that. So these kind of different facets. There's one that's, well, here's the famous moment, but here's the backstory that you didn't necessarily might not have heard about. So it skips around in eras. geographically, but the themes tie everything together. And I'll say that you don't have to be a super hardcore baseball fan to really enjoy this one. This one's pretty new from him. I think it came out last year, and it's one that we've got in print on our shelves right now. Our next chunk of books are going to be ones that are available from other libraries in the Ramapo Catskill system right now. We do have some limited shelf space while our main building is getting renovated. So these ones are ones that are available in print from other libraries, but also a lot of them are available through audiobooks and ebooks too as well online. Our first one is Rickey Henderson, and Rickey, The Life and Legend of an American Original. And of course, Rickey Henderson, super famous for the longevity and all the base stealing. He is the man of steel after all. And I really like this one because it was he's in this first generation of players who experience and really fought for and won free agency. So the way that he's kind of always measuring his worth as a player is through how much money he's able to negotiate and bargain for. And that's something that, prior generations of players hadn't been able to do. So he's coming up in the, he starts in the mid and late 70s, so right when free agency starts in Major League Baseball. And he kind of always has this chip on his shoulder because even though he's stealing all these bases, he's a great leadoff hitter. He's always, getting on the base. He's got that funny stance where he's kind of scrunched up, and he gets a lot of walks too. So he's basically getting on base. And when he gets on base, it's almost always a guaranteed double or triple because he's gonna be able to steal his way and advance into scoring position almost all the time because he is so fast and he can read the pitcher so well. But he still feels like he never is making the money that he should. He feels like the power hitters are always they're the ones getting the big contracts, and he's no slouch in the field either. And he feels like he never is getting his worth. But in the end, he is kind of vindicated. The numbers speak for themselves. I mean, he's all-time most steals, obviously far and away. I think he's still 500 bases ahead, stolen bases ahead of the next guy. So he is able to, even on the tail end of his career, basically say, well, I'd like to play here. It might only be for a year or two, but he gets, he's compensated for that. So a really interesting study of, players and what they're worth and how that whole negotiating process can work out or how it can break down in some cases. And a lot of interesting, when he's playing for the Yankees, there's a lot in there, about his relationship with Billy Martin. So some how do players relate to their coaches? How do they relate to more importantly the management side of things too, and how do they negotiate that contract?
I would say in light of the larger bases, I just read a few articles about stolen bases because they made the bases larger this year and they limited the number of throws a pitcher could make over to first base. And so now that has increased the stolen bases just in the first month of the season. And the article I read was, yeah, but are there any burners? In other words, the burner is the Rickey Henderson,
yeah,
the Vince Coleman. And me having been born mid-70s, I would say in my lifetime, Rickey Henderson is on one hand, maybe on a few fingers, the greatest baseball player, I would say, because his on-base percentage was crazy.
Oh,
yeah.
Exactly
like you said. Once he got on, his on-base percentage was so high, and once he got on, I don't know where he is in runs scored all time, but he's got to be,
He's up there, I think. Yeah.
at the top. The guy, unbelievable. But just in light of the rule changes, we're going to see more stolen bases. We're not going to see Ricky Henderson stolen bases, but
Yeah.
we are going to see more of that in the game. So I think that's a good thing for baseball. And if you really want to know about the best, I guess this is where you got to go.
Yeah, I think, and if we're lucky, we'll get more of that, exciting, kind of base stealing, action. And if you can always advance and get into scoring position, more scoring, I think it'll give them the desired effect. Okay, you want to do the next one here, because this is your guy here.
Okay, so I'm a long-suffering Pittsburgh Pirates fan, so I have to talk about the Roberto Clemente book. A lot of people think in Pittsburgh, I don't know, also in a wider sense, probably people in the Latino community feel like they should maybe also consider retiring the number 21 in honor of Clemente, in addition to 42 with Jackie Robinson. And I think if you read this book, you'll get a sense of why that's the case. The whole thing I always say about Clemente, one of the greatest players ever, but also great person, even a better, perhaps, individual. Just and of course his death related to trying to take supplies to earthquake victims in Central America. So huge figure in Latin America, and kind of the founding father, I think, of Latin American baseball players in the major leagues. But the one story that I always think of from this book is in his first, I think it was the first World Series he was in. Or no, it wasn't the first. It was probably the World Series, I think, against Baltimore. And he hits this dribbler, right? And it's like, guys these days, they hit a little dribbler, the pitcher, you chugging down, you're walking to first and you're out. Well, he runs like his life. They say that he ran to first like his life was dependent on it. And the pitcher sees him running like crazy, rushes the throw, throws it over the guy's head at first. Yeah. And then that run, he goes around and scores. And then that run changes that game, changes the whole series, and the Pirates win the World Series against the Orioles. So always say that to my kids. My daughter's playing softball now. Even last night in the game, little dribbler, the bases were loaded, but the girl ran like crazy at first base. I was like, oh, that's just like Roberto Clemente, You could be a great player, but the little things like that were, I think, emblematic of who he was.
Yeah, and I mean, it's right there in the title, Passion and Grace. So there you go, and that's a perfect example of his playing style. And then and like you said,
and the Pirates are in first place this year.
Yeah,
had to throw that.
Yeah. Alrighty. Okay, so I know this one. You've got you have some opinions on, but I think that's good, right?
Clemente's way too low in this book.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah. So our next one is the Baseball 100, and that's Joe Posnanski, and again, another one of these big national baseball writers. He's a former editor over at Sports Illustrated, and he did this task of trying to rank the 100 best professional baseball players of all time. And of course, this is not an easy thing, and we're all going to disagree with him no matter what he says. And that's kind of the fun part of this book, I think, right? And for me, it's kind of, well, what's the difference between, the 86th and the 85th best player? How are you? What's the real difference when you're down, that low, for instance? And then as you get higher, there's some pretty controversial things he's got there. He can make a good case for some of them, and of course, other ones we're going to disagree, and that's where we can all come along and make our own our own lists, or oh, this guy's too high or this guy's too low. What do you think about this one? Some of the choices. Oh, you're still muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I thought Clemente was too low. That's just me. Yeah. But he had like Adrian Beltre on there. He says in his thing that he skews towards more modern players, but I mean the way where Greg Maddux was like higher than Roberto Clemente.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm a Pirates fan. I hated those Braves teams. Yes. Probably right about Maddux, but
yeah. But
I mean, that's what makes the book fun.
Exactly. All right. Okay, our next one is also pretty fun too. So Many Ways to Lose: The Amazing Story of the New York Mets, the Best Worst Team in Sport. And that's by Devin Gordon. So he's a dyed-in-the-wool Mets fan, and he points out there's a difference between just being a plain old bad team. He says the Detroit Lions are just a bad team. And then there are teams that are good at finding ways to lose, and that's the Mets. And I think there's a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase on this one, and this is kind of the sentiment of the book here. Being a Mets fan is where sincerity and irony meet and have a tickle fight, and that's kind of his theme of the book. It's kind of knowing that the team that you love is going to frustrate you so much. And this is a great example of just, there's so many good baseball, but both on and off the field management stories too. And every team has their their ownership and managerial blunders. It's just, especially in recent history, the Mets just seem to have a lot more of them. But as we speak, sitting at 500 right about now, in the middle of the NL East. So I don't know. I mean, they went out and spent a lot of money and had some real high hopes.
I heard on the Fan yesterday, Scherzer's shot. They're done.
Uh-oh.
That's what they said on the Fan.
We can be this one was really funny. There's a lot of you have to have a sense of humor about some of the stories that Gordon tells in this one. So, I would say, I thought we might be turning a corner here, but who knows? Maybe not.
Hey, despite all that, the 1986 Mets, I'm not even a Mets fan, were one of the greatest teams in the history of professional sports, I might say.
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. And I think in this one, it's really funny because, Gordon talks about how he's 10 years old when that happened. So he's like, the perfect age to be he's not jaded quite yet, and as he grows up, he sees, yes, it's a great team, but then he starts seeing the players as, they become real life people with obviously faults and flaws. They're not the gods that you hold them up to be when you're 10 years old, for instance. And this really is, you maybe hit the apex of your point as a baseball fan, right? But definitely, he says, oh, they're not always a bad team, and he points out there are just bad franchises. The Mets do have these glimmers of hope, and maybe that's what makes it so interesting. Being that you've experienced the whole range of emotion. The highs and the lows, and I think that's what makes this one so fun. Our next one is another one from Tyler Kepner. This one's K, A History of Baseball in 10 Pitches. This one came out, I want to say 2019, so it's a few years old now. You really have to. This one, I'd say it's a lot less accessible than his one on the World Series. This is really a book about pitching technique. Basically, each chapter is about a different pitch. So you'll be looking at slider, fastball, changeup, and kind of how those developed over time. But again, it's not a straight chronology. He'll kind of skip around, there's a lot of good baseball stories, but just so much on technique and form. Definitely as I'll be the first one to admit I'm a pretty casual baseball fan. I think you really have to be. I didn't get as much out of this as I did his other one. I'll say that.
You know what term I heard recently? I read about, and if I had heard before, I'd forgot. Did you ever hear the immaculate inning? Does he talk about that at all?
No.
I guess the immaculate inning is when you strike out the side, or you strike out the side with 9 pitches.
Okay.
It's a thing. It's not completely uncommon, but it's rare enough.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
you'd have to utilize some of those pitches.
Oh yeah.
Some of the best.
Yeah. Have to be a little wily in there throwing those. All right. Our next one. Speaking of pitchers, actually, someone who can do it all, who can pitch and hit. Yeah. We have Showtime, the inside story of Shohei Ohtani and the greatest baseball season ever played. And that's by Jeff Fletcher. And there's a really nice forward here by Joe Madden, his coach. And this one's in print and an ebook and an audiobook that is too.
Mr. Schulner recommended this one to me, and when I was looking at it, I don't know if it said it in there or maybe someone else said it, that Shotani, I don't know, is kind of like Bo Jackson in a way, kind of like by what he's doing. And I didn't get through the whole thing. I just started reading it, but it talks about, kind of the decision to basically be a guy who's could do both. There was someone back there who said, hey, I think you can actually do both. I don't think it was in his mind initially. But, I think he's, when you talk about the greatest you've seen in your lifetime, this guy is probably going to be in that discussion at some point.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, really, what he's doing. And so for anybody who wants to know a little bit more about his background, how he got to where he is, this is where to start.
Yeah, great, early life stories in there about that he basically plays at this, I guess it's like a high school, but they call it an academy, and he writes down his goal for the season and his goal for life. And in his goals for life, he's got his whole baseball career planned out. So, it just kind of shows you the drive and the vision that he's got too. So I really enjoyed that part. Yeah. And, he says, at 29, I want to, have already won a couple Cy Young awards, and I want to be married and start a family.
Yeah, he even had his family in there, right? Like,
yeah.
it was, but at that academy, they were also had him cleaning toilets.
Yeah, I like that.
So there was like a certain humbleness to him.
Yeah,
too.
And I like that detail. And I guess the idea was, well, the pitch, they said, well, the pitchers have to do this, the lowest task, because they're the stars of the game, and the eyes are always on them. But we're going to give them this humbling task so that they learn to do the work that's not appreciated, literally the dirty work, and the work doesn't always get all the attention, lavished on them. So just, a really interesting coming up story. And then, a really, definitely, like you said, so much just pure talent, but also so much drive there as well, I think. So pretty cool. Okay. We're going to do some, we have our extra innings here. So some kind of extras that we're going to throw in there. Got a couple classics here to look at, as well as some other ones that, maybe they're not quite top of the list, but we'll throw them in anyway. The first one is Paths Lit by Lightning: The Life of Jim Thorpe. And this one, he's another, of course, great multi-sport athlete, a lot like Bo Jackson there, but maybe even maybe even more. He was competing in track and field in the Olympics too, so maybe even more, diverse set of skills. But just like Bo Jackson, a natural athlete, and one of the games that he played, of course, was baseball. I really like this one because it's a lot of history. I will warn. I think I put this one in the extra innings category up front because there's just as much history in this book, but you really do need the context. And this is David Maraniss, who also did the Roberto Clemente biography. And you really do need to see the context of where we are in American history. He's born in the 1880s, starts life out on a reservation, attends this one of these Indian technical schools, goes to the Carlisle Indian School, and but why he's there and at this school is just as much a part of the story as the baseball and the sports. So again, there's a lot of historical context that comes along with it, and Maraniss does a good job, I think, of explaining that context, of government attitudes and policies on Native Americans at the time, and just a really a lot of stuff I didn't know, and there is a local connection here. One of Jim's daughters settles in Pearl River, and there's a great story there about how she dropped him off at the bus stop in Pearl River after he came up for a visit, and he's going to take the bus back to New York City, and he's standing under the marquee of the Pearl River Theater there, underneath the marquee, which at the time playing is the biopic about his life. So it's like, it seems like it's something like it could be out of a movie in itself. But there you have it. And so again, another neat little local connection. But again, a book with a lot of baseball, a lot of football, track and field. Basically, it's just an all-around athlete. Baseball is just one of the things that he does kind of naturally well, and a cool local connection. All right, The Natural. So this is our story on, this is Roy. Ray is going to be, yeah. I was going to say, we got a Roy and a Ray coming up.
Roy Hobbs.
Yes, Roy Hobbs.
So we wanted to add some fiction, and I think, generally speaking, The Natural by Bernard Malamud is thought to be perhaps the greatest baseball novel. And so I started to read this book, and a little hard getting into it. I read 2 baseball novels, talk about the other one next. And I saw the movie many, many years ago, so I can't quite remember whether or not it's true, how true it is to the, how true the film is to the book. But it kind of remembered me. There's a scene on a train at the beginning, and it kind of almost reminded me of a Hitchcock film, where you're on the train and the dining car and kind of back and forth through there. And so there's a certain nostalgia in it. And of course, baseball in and of itself is, I think, a very nostalgic sport. Oh, yeah. And the first part of this, as I continued to read, I got more and more into it. And the first part of this book really ends, if you haven't seen the film in a while, it ends with a real whammy. And so really, I can't wait to keep reading this book, because I really want to know what happens to Roy. But he's on his way to Chicago on the train for a tryout with the Cubs, and that's how the book starts. How it ends, I can't quite remember, but reading a little bit about it, and they were saying he's kind of like an anti-hero, sort of a feel to him. But this is a classic, no doubt.
Yeah. All righty. So yeah, another. So I broke up the fiction. Sorry. The one in between here And this one was pretty interesting, especially if you really like history too. This one's called A Brand New Ball Game. Branch Rickey, Bill Veeck, Walter O'Malley, and the Transformation of Baseball, 1945 to 1963. And it's another one of these baseball writers, G. Scott Thomas, and it's this incredible amount of change that goes on in the game post-war, in the post-war years, right? We have integration, you have way more media, you have the start of television, you have teams relocating, you have new franchises, and it doesn't cover it, but you see the events leading up to the politics behind it. You know, there's the whole reserve clause for free agents, and then eventually, you know, the players are going to unionize in 1966. So it doesn't quite get there, but you see how the wheels are going to spin and start turning because of all the money and the politics in the game. And of course, there's still another decade away from free agency too. But you see how that's kind of all going to play out after you read this. And yeah, and you know, Branch Rickey, Walter O'Malley, there's a lot of good New York stories here. You know, not only are they relocating the teams out west, but they're kind of characters in themselves. And then Jean Payson too, she's the heiress who's, you know, gets the Mets off the ground. Another kind of character in herself as well. And they kind of the larger than life management and money people behind the scenes in a period of just tremendous change for the country and baseball. And you know, the changes are kind of mirroring each other. So kind of,
I was pointing out to Joe ahead of time, I think Branch Rickey, having read the Jackie Robinson and the Roberto Clemente books in the last few years, Branch Rickey was a figure in both of those because he was with the Dodgers and then left the Dodgers to go to the Pirates. So he signed both of those players. And
yeah,
so
and he was
interesting to know more about him.
Yeah, and so this, kind of a character study of these real movers and shakers. There's a chapter there on Bill Shea and the whole Continental League that kind of fails, and then it's like, okay, well, we'll just go off and we'll start this other New York team then. And so, yeah, and again, a lot of New York stories too, by just virtue of, you know, we're only a few years away from well, we're right on the, you know, the heels of the Mets in '62 there. So yeah, a very fun kind of look at a little academic in some ways, but these larger than life characters, pretty good look at them. Okay, and here we go. Here's the other big one in terms of fiction, right?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I devoured this book pretty quickly. This is the book that the film Field of Dreams is based on, and I don't think it's not really a spoiler, but I'll just but you may, if you haven't read the book but you've seen the movie. I haven't seen the movie recently, but it's a classic movie from kind of my childhood. So it's something that I'm kind of familiar with. The what's his name? James Earl Jones character, the reclusive writer in the book, is that character is actually J.D. Salinger. So J.D. Salinger is a reclusive writer. For whatever reason, whether it was a legal issue or otherwise, that they didn't want, or maybe they thought it would be better to have him as this other type of character. But it is actually J.D. Salinger in the book. And I thought that was just that was really interesting, you know. They'd still go to Fenway, that sort of thing. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, even having, you know, maybe it was because I could visualize it all in a way in my head, because I've seen the film and most people have seen the film and they know it. There is a whole other kind of a side element in there that was not in the film at all. At least not that I can recall. With the Cubs and some thing about an old Cubs player and sort of thing. The Moonlight Graham character, if you remember, the guy who was a doctor and he played one game, but he never got an at bat. And so they go and get him, and then that whole thing, that is pretty true. The book is pretty true. The film is true to the book, I should say, in that sense. And that's really a very interesting part of it. They kind of build it out even a little bit more in the book. Obviously, you can do more with the book, but I don't know. I just love this, and I could see why they wanted to make a film about it, and it was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what a love letter to baseball, and like you said, just the whole thing is nostalgia, right? It's entirely based on that, and what a great. I mean, and Kinsella, the author, not the character, just so many similes and metaphors throughout the whole thing, and they're these quaint little Midwestern, comments about the breeze or how nice his wife's hair is. It's all these little, but again, it's very just so just built on nostalgia, and like you said, all those characters who maybe they didn't get the chance, they finally get their shot in the game, and what a great piece of magical realism, I think you'd call it, if you had to describe it as but yeah, very, very whimsical and nostalgic baseball book that you can really tell is this author's just love letter to baseball and what it means to him as like, I guess, as a game, but as kind of like this institution. So yeah, and I think that's it for us today.
And so I'm glad that Joe joined us and to kind of mix things up. But what we're going to do next month is summer reading. So it's the first Monday in June, I believe. Let me double check here. It's going to be June 2nd at 4 p.m. And we're going to talk about what the summer reading program will look like for the library this year. And also some books that we recommend for kind of light, breezy, and fun summer reading books. And then we'll kind of generally talk about some of the fiction and nonfiction things that we're currently reading. So Nancy will be back next month with me. But I really enjoyed this. I think baseball is going to be very exciting this summer with the rule changes. So I think it was good timing to do this now. It's early in the season, so everyone still has that shot at the World Series. Even the lowly Pirates, who have somehow managed to get themselves into first place. And even after being swept by the Devil Rays the last 3 games, still in first. So talk about magical realism.
All righty. Well, thanks for joining us today. And we'll see everybody in the next one. Looking forward to summer reading with Nancy.
Okay. Have a good night.